Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and you know what, for me it's been a crazy day of Final Fantasy VII Remake and Final Fantasy VII news in general, but I'm going to round out my evening and start your day, since this won't release till the next morning, with one more bit of information, an interview that was conducted between Famitsu and Tetsuya Nomura. This covers the topics of all of the titles that were announced. Final Fantasy VII Remake integrate the PS5 remaster with additional Yuffie DLC, as well as the mobile games First Soldier and Ever Crisis. Now, I am reading you this translation of the interview on Itakuji. It's a store that we've worked with in the past, and while this video is not sponsored by them, they've been great for the channel. It's been great grabbing some additional products for them that I haven't been able to get that are in Japan, that are not here available stateside. So I'll include a link to not only the actual article in the description, but also the website itself, the store itself. And also thank you to Audrey, who is the one who runs the website and also does these translations. Thank you to her for doing that. She's been doing that a lot with a lot of 7 Remake related stuff since it came out, and that has been heavily appreciated by the community. So this interview actually has some very interesting details. So some of it's just kind of fluff. This first part talking about the lighting and the textures and the fog effects of the PlayStation 5 version. Like, yeah, of course it's going to look better. It's going to have the 4K mode, the 60 FPS mode. Of course, there's questions about the haptic DualSense controls, which they say they do a little bit with some of that stuff, but that they're in the second remake, or in Remake Part 2, they're going to be putting the PS5 a lot more to the test and utilizing more of its features there than they are in this new DLC and in the PS4 to PS5 update. They also mentioned the photo mode and how it's a little bit different from Remind. This is a lot more about capturing the moment. So like as you're playing the game, you just swap to photo mode and immediately everything freezes, the game pauses, and you can move the camera around to capture the moment in a highly cinematic way, which is pretty cool. Just to be able to stop the game right there, go right in the photo mode if you know an attack that you really want a really cool screenshot of. That's going to be something we definitely see a lot on social media and in community posts. Now, it goes from talking more about the features to stuff that's featured in the trailer, including the Vice battle in the DLC. So Nomura's been asking for this character as a secret boss since they were releasing the PS4 version. He was just like, I wonder how that would work out, because we never really get to see Vice fight Cloud. That's just not something we ever really get to see. So he wanted another formidable boss, and that's what he's been asking for. So Nomura actually designed the original Vice in Dirge of Cerberus. He's got a different outfit here as opposed to him being half naked, as Famitsu calls it in here. So he said he just wanted to present him with a sense of richness. So he gave him a shirt, basically, is what he's saying here. Now, he doesn't want to go into too much information about the battle with Vice. He's asking if he's going to be present in other parts of the story. Obviously, in the trailer, we do see Deep Ground, so it's well within reason. But he doesn't want to say anything else in regards to how Vice ties into the actual DLC story. But there is a little bit more information on him overall. Something that they kind of try to touch on right here. There will be a new boss character in the DLC, but is that character going to be different than Vice, such as another character from the compilation? So he does confirm that while Vice is indeed a new DLC boss that will be coming, one in the Yuffie DLC, I should say, there is another new boss that is going to be different from that. But he's not going to tell us who it's going to be, but maybe it'll be his brother, or maybe it'll be other members of Deep Ground. Of course, everyone's suspecting it could be Genesis as well. And all the people who don't understand the compilation of Final Fantasy VII are like, what the heck are you talking about? You'll learn, don't worry. They also ask about what kind of character Sinan is. Now, I've gone back and watched that trailer a bunch, and I see moves that Sinan is doing that are very similar to things Sid does in Advent Children. So I'm wondering if, while we're not able, they actually mention here that you're not actually able to control Sinan, I'm wondering if he's just like the framework for Sid. I've seen some people suggest this on Twitter, I think in my comment section and the other videos as well. And it makes a lot of sense that they would actually do it this way. And I think they just might do that. So with that being said, they talk a little bit about Sinan. Yuffie comes to Midgar looking for materia, which is, well, come on, it's Yuffie, come on. But ends up getting involved in an avalanche mission. But they're doing their own thing, the original cast doing their own thing. We believe this takes place around the time that Cloud meets Aerith, and probably, continues up until probably the plate falling and a little bit later on after that. And that we're going to see what's going on in the background here with this DLC. Yuffie and Sinon, speaking about Sinon not being playable, Yuffie can instead use a tactical mode, which will allow you to give commands to Sinon, however. On top of that, they're going to be able to battle together, do combo attacks. We see this a lot in the trailer. So it's going to be a little bit different. That kind of reminds me of Arnea in Final Fantasy XV's original release, but this seems much more tightly designed around both of them actually having combo attacks, and less of it just being like a guest character that you can give a couple of commands, but otherwise fights on their own. Now, moving on into the Battle Royale, this section of this interview makes First Soldier not seem even remotely as bad as I initially took it. I'm still not down for the idea, but Battle Royale was maybe not the best term for them to advertise it as. It technically meets the conditions of what we would associate as Battle Royale-esque, but the scale of it is so much lower that it's not like... let's just go through this. So the First Soldier uses Midgard as its background. Where does it take place in the story? It's the first place in the entire story. It's chronologically the first event because it takes place 30 years prior to the game. Before this, before Crisis was the earliest that they'd ever gone back, which is like 6 years, I think it's mentioned in this interview. So they're just trying to establish Soldier. But they said the story's not like super important. It just has the backbone of the Soldier story, but it's not anything too super important. The Soldier Cadets fight not only monsters, but the Cutter, Scorpion Sentinel, and other Shinra machines, but it's just part of their training. They have to undergo various situations to experience realistic battles. Reasonable. Give us a basic rundown of the battle rules. This is where it feels very strange that they decided to advertise it as Battle Royale. It's either 1v1 battles or 3v3 battles, and the winner is the last person or team standing. It's not like large-scale, massive amounts of people that are going to be there. Now, maybe they mean it's solo or trio queue, and there's more people and more than 2 or 6 overall players on the map. It could mean that, and it could just be the communication not 100% being there of what they mean by this. I'll leave that open, but if it's just that, then it's just a little PvP-esque mobile game. That's not as bad, but it's still... I guess the reason they go with Battle Royale is this next part here. It's by gathering items and subduing monsters, which are RPGs. So basically, the PvEVP, the PvE section is there for you to earn items and get better gear and level up before taking on your opponent. So as opposed to, you break into a house and you loot everything in the house like is normally a battle royale, it's instead focused on doing these PvE elements so that when you do get into a battle with an actual opponent, that you have as much of an edge as possible. The best weapon, the best armor, whatever items you actually need, and whatever level that you can actually get up to, and skills that would come with that level. So, again, this is something that if you didn't tell me it was a battle royale, I probably wouldn't be as ugh. But at least this doesn't sound as bad, but I'm still not going to play it. I'm just not trying to play a third-person action shooter with battle royale elements. It just doesn't appeal to me. But it's good to get a little bit more clarification on what exactly makes it a battle royale and how it kind of stands apart from traditional battle royales, and that it's not super large scale, if what I'm understanding here is correct. Now, this is the section I want to see, and there are some juicy tidbits about Ever Crisis. So for Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis, the stories from before Crisis, which is, 6 years before Final Fantasy VII, up until Dirge, which is 3 years after the original, will use a battle system designed especially for Ever Crisis. That means Advent Children, which was originally a movie, will also be playable. I mean, I just assumed that it would be, but, decent question. Ever Crisis is basically like another remake. I mean, they said it. I didn't even have to say it. They're the ones who are saying it. But they're using the bird's eye view and the chibi characters, but then doing regular full-body detail characters designed for the battle parts. Very loyal to the original game, just upscaled to have some 7 remake models as well as upgraded, more chibi-style models. It's not a command-style RPG. They feel like they command... This game is the answer to those who said they like the command-style RPG system, meaning like original Final Fantasy VII. So it's specifically to sate those fans. The titles are divided into chapters that allow you to have a free gameplay style. The contents will cover the original Final Fantasy VII and work its way through the compilation and include the first soldier. So it's going to even... What? That's... Okay, so it's even going to have... Wait a minute. I missed that the first time I read it. So wait, the Battle Royale parts... The little tiny, they said story that's not very dense, is in Ever Crisis. Okay, All right. In regards to the first soldier I mentioned earlier, Ever Crisis will also have part of the story within this game. In particular, since the story covers what happened before Soldier was established, we've added in a part about that legendary hero's youth. So that's actually the big thing people wanted to learn about First Soldier is Sephiroth's youth, because he is basically the progenitor of the entire system. Well, technically he's not, but, he is our first soldier in a sense. That story in particular is a huge eye catcher, and we have asked Nojima-san to write that scenario. We hope you look forward to it. So we'll get to learn a little bit more about a younger Sephiroth when it comes to Ever Crisis, which, you know what? I don't have to play first Soldier to get that information. I'll just play Ever Crisis. Works for me. There's a lot of people who want a remaster of other games. Instead of the remaster, this seems like a completely new game. So why did you decide to combine them all into one? The concept of this game is to use the original Final Fantasy VII as its base that players can enjoy. The original Final Fantasy VII, First Soldier, and 7 Remake are all separate entities. So I don't think this would wrap up other compilation titles. Okay, I don't really know how to take that information. It's just they just said that it's all the original 7 stuff. Cool. Will the story of Final Fantasy VII be presented chronologically, or will the story from 7 before Crisis leading up to Dirge be rebuilt specifically for Ever Crisis? You will not need to play each title in its entirety before the next. Rather, each title will have its own chapters that you can select and play. Think of it more like a chronology of Final Fantasy VII. So I guess that does mean they're not technically releasing chronologically. It's just going to have a bunch of different chapters and content. Speaking of which, they said their new chapters will be added every month. That doesn't necessarily mean a new game is added every month. That means while they're working through a game, there's going to be new chapters. Now, this is still the big question. It is a free-to-play game that gradually releases chapters every month. We still don't know if it's like a character gacha or if it's like you can download it for free, but every single chapter is going to cost you $3, $5, whatever. That's the question, and that's what we realistically need to know. This is the biggest thing people need to know about Ever Crisis right now, and I do hope it is addressed sometime in the near future. In regards to the battle parts, it looks like the battle style from 7 Remake made into command style, but can you briefly explain? The battle system for the original Final Fantasy VII was based on the ATB system, so they're going with that. The materia setup will also follow the original. The weapons, materials, summons, and limit breaks can be used, further opening the battle system. The only thing I will say is that it looks a lot more like Final Fantasy XIII's ATB, where you have a gauge that fills 5, 6, 7 bars, and then an action uses 2 bars or 1 bar. And then but you can actually choose your allies' abilities as well when you click over to them. So it doesn't seem entirely like it's just like borrowing 7's ATB. It really looks a lot more like 13's ATB, but with a little bit more involvement between you actually giving everyone their individual actions instead of plotting out using them with the auto use button. The new 3D chibi characters, as well as the 2D art look designs all look new. Who is responsible? So they did Fujise Risa, who they wanted everything to be done in 3D CG, but in order to maximize the presentation of the original game's atmosphere, this presented quite a few problems. Consider asking someone within the 7 staff to do the character designs, but we all carry heavy workloads already. Yeah, I'm sure you do, because you guys are doing a lot more with this remake and compilation than I think anyone really expected going into 2021. Thankfully, Fujise came to us with some avatar designs, and we looked at her and we thought, hey, wouldn't this art style fit this game? So even though she was part of a team on another title, we asked her to join the Ever Crisis one. We had new hope. That's very, very high speaking. But anyway, I think the new models look really good in Ever Crisis, so I'm not complaining. Since the game seems to be very story driven, will you do voice recording? So they're actually kind of torn about this. I find this interesting that they're like, oh, well, the originals don't have voice acting, but we really should have voice acting for this. But then do they have to get voice acting for the characters? How much voice acting do they need? Maybe they end up doing it like Dissidia Opera Omnia, where they voice things only in Japanese, even in the Western release of the game. I wouldn't be surprised to see that, but they're considering how to do it. If they want to add voices, it'll probably be at a minimum. So expect not a lot of voice acting in Ever Crisis. I kind of did expect barely any voice acting. I expected it to really be as much of a throwback to the OGs as possible, where it's same art styles with just upgraded and brought into the modern era. Kind of what people expected the remake to be in the first place, but not what I expected. Just what you've seen a ton of people saying it online. Now, the meaning of intergrade, you can see what my current search is right now. I mean, you could see it with Vice in the earlier section, but you can tell that I was like, okay, where does it say Vice and all this stuff? So Intergrade, why Intergrade? So there's actually two reasons for it being called Intergrade. But the question is, the next installment is of course highly anticipated, but there's Intergrade, First Soldier, and Ever Crisis. With the sudden announcement of 3 new titles, will you be the director and concept design for all of them? Although we announced 3 different titles, as I mentioned earlier, I have an unprecedented amount of work right now. Since we already have 7 Remake as the base game to work on, as well to understand what types of improvements to incorporate, the next installment will be directed by Hamaguchi, who was the co-director of the original 7 Remake. I will carry forth as the creative director as well as the mobile games for 7 Remake and the mobile games. This won't change my basic involvement with the work, so I hope for your continued support. So Nomura is no longer the director, which people are going to read as, I guess you could say that's neutral information. He'll still be part of the project. He'll still have a large voice within the project. I mean, he's the creative director after all. But I'm curious to see if we see sort of a change in pace, a change in presentation with Hamaguchi, who was the co-director, or if he largely follows in the same stead. I know this is going to be a hotly discussed topic within the Final Fantasy VII community, within the Final Fantasy community overall. I kind of just take it as neutral news. I don't suspect much will change. I don't think the direction they're on will change much at all with this, but I know some people will just be like, yeah, great. And I'm just going to be like, whatever. I don't think it's going to change all that much. Since your work with Final Fantasy VII titles will not change much, even they say it right there, you're also focusing on other titles. We look forward to those. With the announcement of 3 new titles, can you please say a few words to the fans who are anticipating the next installment? So this is where they make mention, I had mentioned this in my other video, the staff is incredibly dedicated, made it in a very timely manner. In the PS5 port, that is. I'd like you to first enjoy Intergrade. So in regards to the title Intergrade, which I actually kind of like this little explanation from him, the original Final Fantasy VII was called Final Fantasy VII International for the improved overseas version. For those who don't know, the original Final Fantasy VII in Japan doesn't really have super bosses. Ruby Weapon and Emerald Weapon are completely absent as optional super bosses, and there's some other things that aren't in the original as well. So we really did get the better version of Final Fantasy VII when it came overseas the first time. And he actually makes mention that it's paying homage to, you know, the original. The 7 International was the improved overseas version, so Intergrade can be the improved Final Fantasy VII Remake. So it's a bit of an homage, but the word Intergrade is also has the meaning of being a middle, which serves as a midway point between 7 Remake and the next installment. It also means to move, which is a nod to moving towards the PS5 system in the next installment. That might be the first time Nomura's ever explained his reasoning for the name, and it made total sense to me. Not to say Kingdom Hearts titles don't make sense. Anyway, moving on. We also have included a new DLC episode revolving around Yuffie, and there's content within it you can't miss. Vice is a formidable opponent in the battle simulator. Wait, so above, he didn't want to comment on how Vice was involved in the story. We can assume Vice is involved in the story. If Deep Ground's involved, there's no reason Vice won't be there. But we know now that he's an opponent in the battle simulator. That's where the fight is. So maybe you encounter him in the story, but you only fight him in the battle simulator? I don't know. He doesn't want to share information, but he just told us he's in the battle simulator. He has to be more involved if he says he doesn't want to say anything. So I don't know how else to take that. Also, with the revival of the compilation through Ever Crisis and First Soldier, I was very surprised when I heard from Katase they were planning to do both at the same time. I thought they would focus on one at a time, but Katase said, nope. We're doing both. I like that. I remember suggesting they should narrow down their workload. However, they were all bonded by producer Ichikawa's strong enthusiasm, and he said if we are to do it, we need to do it without any loss in quality. It seemed like an impossible request, but we overcame the battle and got in the clear. I'm so happy we're able to announce these titles. We will also open a beta test to get feedback, so I hope you look forward to that. Please let it be for Ever Crisis. I don't want to do feedback for First Soldier. I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. As you wait for the next installment, I hope you're able to enjoy these titles. So keep in mind, as you wait for the next installment, I hope you enjoy these 3 new titles. That heavily implies we will not see 7 Remake Part 2 until at the very least late 2022. To be fair, I think it was unreasonable to expect it would be any time before 2022. Heck, most people reasonably assume it's 2023. But at the very least, you know that until Ever Crisis comes out, there's no window in which 7 Remake comes out, like surprises us in Christmas of 2021. Not that, again, I think anyone really thought that, but you never know. Some people really like to assume, based on Nomura saying things like, oh, I want to release the next part like much quicker or something like that. That is, you know, people got wild pipe dreams. You know, I think we'll see a PC version before we ever see Remake 2. So, yeah, but that's the whole interview. So thank you again to Audrey for doing the translation and posting it over on Itaikuji. And let me know what you guys think about the various informations here. I'm really curious to see what people think about this new information about First Soldier. Again, I'm still not interested in it, but it at least sounds better. Sort of, a little bit. I don't know. And all these other things about, so again, you can see I searched through a lot. And Ever Crisis, especially with this new information. I just want to know how they plan to monetize it, man. But anyway, thank you again for watching this video. Thank you again to Ite, Kuji, and Audrey for doing the translations. Be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share, and stay tuned. If anything else pops up with 7 Remake, 16, Final Fantasy 14, you know I'll post it as soon as I can get around to it. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Until then, take care.